Hello everybody. Water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. And then blah blah blah, the Avatar disappeared when the world needed him the most, Aang's the new Avatar, and Katara believes that he can save the world. You get the point. You read the title. I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender for the very first time, and today I'm going to talk about Season 1. Honestly, I am not sure how it took me this long to watch this show. I mean, it's been off the air for like 13 years, and I had never seen a single episode of it until 2 weeks ago. But anyway, I finally watched it, and I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think that it really has an easy premise to understand. I mean, it obviously tells you the premise at the beginning of every single episode. There were four nations: the Water Tribe, the Earth Tribe, the Fire Tribe, and the Air Tribe. And they used to live in harmony together, but then the Fire Nation attacked, the Avatar disappeared, and now 100 years later, Aang is the new Avatar, and he has to learn all four elements to save the world. I think that the villain of this series, meaning Zuko, is really good, because he's not really a villain. Like, he's kind of, like, yeah, he's, trying to capture Aang, who is, obviously the good guy, but, when he's not trying to capture Aang, in pretty much every single other situation besides that, you are kind of rooting for him. Like, there's like the third episode where he's going up against, Admiral Zhao. He wasn't an admiral at that point, but he's going up against him, and you're rooting for him to win the battle. So, I think that's cool how, like, they kind of set him up like he is the villain, but he's not really a villain. Like, you still root for him, and he's really only going after Aang because he got banished from the Fire Nation, and he's just trying to gain his honor back. And if there was a different way to do that, he wouldn't be trying to capture Aang. It's just, that's just how it is. And I think that we're gonna at some point get a redemptive arc for him. I really hope so, because I think that he's such an interesting character, and I think he's just kind of doing the wrong, like, making the wrong choices, but he's still really good at heart. Like, I think he's kind of like a Loki kind of character, where, he's doing bad stuff, but he's not really a bad guy. It's just the situation that he's in, so, we understand where he's coming from. So I think that's why he's just such a good villain of the series, because he's not really a villain. I guess the true villain of at least this season was Admiral Zhao, which I assume he died in the last episode, so I'm assuming he's not going to come back in Season 2. We'll have a different villain. I think Zuko's sister, because that was the final shot of, like, the final scene of the season was the Fire Lord was telling Zuko's sister to go after Aang, so I think that that's going to be cool to see that next season, to see Zuko's sister, because he mentioned her earlier in the final episode, and we get to, it was just kind of something that was just, you just mentioned her, and you're just kind of like, okay, I guess, like, you're not really thinking too much about it, and then they show her at the end, so that's cool that we'll see that next season. And yeah, I think just Zuko and Uncle Iroh, there are, kind of villains because they're going after Aang, but they're really not villains at all. They're just, that's just their situation, that they're just having to go after Aang to gain back their honor, to return to the Fire Nation. And I think they'll realize that the Fire Lord and the Fire Nation isn't good at all, so they're gonna decide at some point, forget all of this, this isn't good anyway. So, because the thing that got Zuko banished was that he questioned a battle plan where they were gonna send in the, new recruits to be kind of bait for who they were trying to battle. And, he's like, you can't just send them into, to just die. Like these guys are fighting, they're loyal to the Fire Nation, and you're just gonna send them into just to their death. And it's true, like, that's right, like, that's a bad thing to do. And I think he's gonna realize that's kind of just how the Fire Nation is. They're just evil, and I think he's gonna realize that's not even something he wants to be part of anymore. So I think Zuko and Uncle Iroh are gonna eventually stray from that path and join Aang, and I think that what's gonna happen is in season 3. Don't say if I'm right or wrong about this. That's not really the point of why I'm saying this, but I think that in season 3, when Aang's gonna be learning firebending, I think it's gonna be Zuko who's gonna teach him. So that's what I'm predicting is gonna happen, and I think that's gonna be cool if that happens. That's pretty much all I have to say about Zuko and Uncle Iroh. I think they're they're villains now, but they're not really villains, and eventually they'll become good guys and realize what they're doing is wrong. But now I want to talk about our 3 main characters, Aang, Katara, and Sokka. But first, I want to say that in looking through the episodes to remind me of like the certain titles of the episodes and stuff, I found out that Dave Filoni directed a bunch of episodes in this season, and I just think that's so cool because Dave Filoni's the guy behind Clone Wars and Rebels and The Mandalorian. He works with that with Jon Favreau, so I think that's really cool that this guy that does a lot of Star Wars stuff that I love. He did some of the episodes this season for Avatar, so that's pretty cool. I think that's why I enjoyed these a lot. I don't think, from looking at it, I don't think he directs any more in season 2 or 3, but it's cool that it was there for the first season. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. That was just a cool thing that I noticed. But I think that getting into our 3 main characters, again, Aang, Katara, and Sokka, they really have a good relationship with each other. I think that the sibling rivalry between Katara and Sokka is really good. There's a nice relationship between Aang and Katara being set up. I assume they're going to end up being together at the end of this. I don't really need them to like kiss or anything at the end of the series, because they're only like 12 years old, so I don't really need that. But if there's like a flash forward at the end of the series where we see that they're together, that's fine. But whatever happens. And I think that this season did a good job at giving each of our 3 main protagonists, each of them an episode for like themselves, so where they're the focus of the episode. I think that the episode Jet, which is directed by Dave Filoni, by the way, is a really good Sokka episode because it really shows how good of a leader he is. I think that the episode The Waterbending Scroll was a good Katara episode. It kind of showed, because she was starting to show Aang waterbending, and it kind of, was getting her a bit jealous that he, figured out waterbending so quickly, where it took her, a few months or a few years to do it, and he just did it in just a few seconds. Which, I mean, Aang is he's an airbender, so I feel like going from, being a bender to just switching the thing that you're bending is a little bit easier than having to just figure out bending altogether with water. I think it's probably, I think it's probably easier to transfer air to water. So I think that's kind of like Katara should be giving him a bit more slack on that. Like, yeah, he was already a bender, so, I mean, I see where Katara's coming from. Like, yeah, it took her so long to do it, and he's figured out in just like a few seconds. But again, he is a bender, so it makes sense that he's gonna catch on to it quicker than somebody who wasn't a bender at all. I think that the episode, The Southern Air Temple, the 3rd episode of this season, and the 3rd episode of the series, is a good Aang episode, even though, he is the main guy. He's the main guy of this series, so kind of all episodes are episodes for him, like, unless they're Sokka or Katara episodes, like, pretty much all of them are kind of focused on Aang. But I think that's a really good episode of giving his backstory. I think the episode called The Storm gives Aang's backstory really well. Like, shows how the Airbender monks, revealed to him that he's the Avatar, and he didn't want to be the Avatar because it meant that his friends weren't gonna play with him anymore because they kind of had this idea in their mind that he's the Avatar, he's way more powerful, it's gonna be unfair. And then the rest of the monks want to, not have him be with the one monk that was his friend. I don't remember his name, but so he decides that's what causes him to disappear, to go into to get into that ice, kind of very Captain America like. We see how he ended up in the ball of ice in the beginning of the series, so I think that's cool that they gave his backstory in that episode. And also in this episode of The Storm, we get Zuko's backstory, and also in the Southern Air Temple, which I also said was an Aang episode, it's also a Zuko episode where we see, that's the other plot line of the Southern Air Temple is Zuko going against Zhao. Like I mentioned that before, where you're rooting for Zuko even though he's the villain. And then in The Storm, you also have the two plot lines where you're showing Aang's backstory as well as Zuko's backstory, seeing, what got him banished and why the Avatar is so important to him, why he needs to capture Aang, because that's what's going to allow him back into the Fire Nation, which, like I mentioned before, I think he's going to realize isn't something that he wants to do anyway, so he'll get a redemptive arc. So I think it's cool that they kind of give each character an episode to show, to just focus on them. Even Uncle Iroh, he gets an episode in the Blue Spirit, I think that's which one it is. I think, where he gets captured by Earthbenders, and we see him, get to use his firebending powers. So that's cool. We get to see Uncle Iroh a bit in action. I think that the humor in this series so far, at least in season 1, is really good. I think a lot of it comes from just Sokka's constant misfortune.
Look, I'm gonna predict the future now. It's going to keep drizzling. See?
A lot of it is funny, a lot of it is sad. I kind of feel bad for him. Like, in the last episode, the girl that he's in love with, who's engaged, ends up sacrificing herself and becoming the moon.
He is in love with a girl he works with who's engaged, so just cut me some slack.
So that's sort of on, like, the sad side of it. There's also, the funny, lighthearted side of it where, he's, isn't paying attention and walks off a ledge into the water, that kind of stuff. So I think that a lot of the humor kind of comes from, that side of things. There's a lot of moments in this season where I just, laughed out loud. I think there's a lot of, with the relationship between Zuko and Uncle Iroh, there's a lot of funny moments in that. So I think the humor is very good in this series so far. And we get an end-of-the-world deadline in this season. They say where the series is going to go. We find out in the episode Avatar Roku, Winter Solstice Part 2, where Aang talks to the Avatar before him, Roku, and he tells him that there's going to be a comet coming at the end of the summer, and the Fire Lord's going to use it to amplify his powers and, I guess, take over the world. So, gotta stop that. And the only way to do it is Aang has to master all 4 elements. He has to master bending for all 4 elements, air bending, which he's got down. We need to do water bending, earth bending, and fire bending. So that's going to be interesting to see him learn all, the rest of the 3 he has to do. He's already pretty much got water bending down. Katara, I guess, is going to teach him the rest. He has to learn earth bending, which will be next season, and then fire bending, which is going to be the 3rd season, I assume. And again, like I predicted, I think Zuko is going to teach him firebending, at least at some point. At least he'll take a part in teaching him firebending. And Aang is going to learn all of that in 8 months, whereas most other avatars can take, usually take years to learn all the elements. He has to learn them in 8 months to save the world. I think it's cool that they set up this kind of deadline and, set up the struggle of, he has to learn all these elements by the end of the summer so he can save the world. And it's never been done before. And I think it's cool that they kind of, they set up where the series is going. Exactly where it's starting and where it's going to end. It's going to end, obviously, with the comet coming, and it's probably going to be very last second with Aang, saving the day at probably the last possible second ever, because that's how TV shows works, and really just any story works is, it's not going to be that he saves the world in the end of spring. No, it has to be at the end of the summer, right when the comet is coming. So I think that's cool that they set up. They tell you exactly where the series is going, and I honestly cannot wait for what's going to happen in the series finale when Aang has mastered all 4 elements, which I'm also guessing he's probably not going to have mastered firebending fully when he has to go fight, but I'm just really excited to see just Aang just using all 4 elements together to take out the Fire Lord, Zuko's dad, and saving the day. I'm imagining that's going to be really epic. So yeah, so I'm just really excited for where this series is going to go. I'm excited to start season 2. I'll post my thoughts on season 2 next week, and the week after that I'm going to post my thoughts on season 3. So stay tuned for that. And also comment below your thoughts on the video and your thoughts on After Last Airbender. Do you like that I started watching it, or is it just not your thing? And also, please remember to like, subscribe, check out some of our other videos. And with that said, that's a wrap.